welcome to another episode of the Blast Motion Podcast. Today we have Dan Cabuling from KPI Softball. If you listen to our other episode on KPI Baseball with Eric, this is going to be talking about the softball side, some of the similarities and differences in training baseball and softball players. So enjoy this episode. Thank you so much for coming on the show today. I think this is going to be a great episode. We recently just had one with KPI Baseball talking about what they do on that side. But I'm really glad Dan's here today because we're going to talk about some of the differences and similarities in baseball and softball. Dan trains a lot on the softball side, and we're going to talk about some of those similarities and differences as we go from that. Dan, can you talk a little bit about your facility, where it's at, and kind of what you guys are all about before we dive into some of these topics?
Yeah, so our facility, we just expanded into a brand new facility right around the corner, and it's given us an opportunity on the softball front to grow into the old facility. It's still a very, very new and nice facility. But yeah, I think we're in range between 40, 50 softball players on average. Age ranges are like 8 to 18, very similar population as our baseball side. We recently broke 100 total athletes last offseason. So, we run a lot of the similar systems, but you'll see, training softball players, training female athletes, and then the data that we collect from them is not drastically different, but there's some big areas that we need to address that are different.
Definitely. And knowing those differences are always going to help our listeners. So let's say we come right into your facility. We're a new athlete that's starting to train. Can you talk a little bit about understanding kind of the baseline metric ranges and what you're going to look at based on that athlete?
Yeah. So when an athlete comes into our facility, I'm sure Eric talked about this, they're going to get assessed. We're not going to start with their skill assessment. We're going to start with a physical assessment. The physical assessment gives us an understanding of how they're built. There's some very big difference between the way our female athletes are built and the way they move versus our male athletes. And I'll probably tap on this again. But once they're done with that, we're going to go through a data collection process. We have adjusted this a few different ways. One of the things is an obstacle we're trying to overcome as a softball facility is softball population. The girls are very used to just coming in once a week. I go to my one lesson, and then that's how I work on my swing, and that's going to be enough to get better. And I'll probably hit on some of the ways that we're trying to attack that. But due to that, baseball side, we'll collect 100 swings. Usually takes us about a week or two to do that. On the softball side, we've gone down to 50 swings. So we're going to collect those 50. We're going to do video at the same time. We're going to see and look at your blast data and also at your hit tracks data, connect the dots of where things are kind of falling apart. And almost every girl, it starts with bat speed. It used to be we talk a lot about attack angle, and I've retracted some of my statements I used to make in the past about attack angle is the biggest issue with our softball population. It's bat speed. And I think number one, they don't know what their bat speeds are. They don't know what's good. They don't know what's bad. And they don't know what they're capable of. We see instant increases in bat speed just by giving them feedback of, hey, like that swing was 42 miles an hour. Like that's almost 20 miles an hour below what we would really, really want for our high level athletes. Let's just try starting off with swinging harder. I'd say most girls come in bat speeds wise, we're going to see 40 to 50 miles an hour. We're going to get them and hopefully get into that low 50s. Our better hitters get to that 55 to 58. And then I'm talking averages too. I'm not talking maxes. I'm talking averages. And then I'd say our best hitters are all above 58 to 60 miles an hour. And if we get beyond that, that's where we're starting to see some real damage.
Yeah, and that blast too, if you've used us in the past, we have resources and we have bat speed ranges for each level of play. So we are looking for different bat speeds at, a 12U athlete or a 16U athlete and how that can kind of be really important. So do you guys train bat speed certain times of the year, all year? How do you guys approach bat speed training if that's the main thing we have to improve?
Yeah, bat speed's trained all year. I think, we'll probably hit this again too. Like the softball population, big difference between our baseball and softball. Softball players are heavily, heavily incentivized just to make contact. Swinging and missing is the end of the world. Whereas you watch the baseball population, they don't care. Baseball players, that one time I hit that bomb, I'm going to talk about that double I hit, but the other 100 swings that you swung and missed is not a big deal. And so swinging to just make contact is a huge issue on our softball side. And so getting them to learn how to rotate fast, I think another big physical screen piece is almost every girl has plenty of spine mobility, almost like hypermobility, think like contortionist, gymnast. And they don't have the core strength to actually get the separation we want. And the way the body works is if you don't control a range of motion, you're not going to access it in games. You might do it in a drill, you might do it in a low stress environment. It's not going to translate to the field, and you're going to see coaches tell you that you fall back to old habits, which is why our bat speed training isn't just with our Proteus and with our blast motion and with our swing trainers and with our med balls and water bags. It's also facilitated in the weight room. So we're attacking it as in as many different ways as possible to make sure we're building that foundation to rotate fast.
That's awesome. Let's step away kind of from the bat speed side and the intent. How do you guys get them mentally to understand that it's okay to swing and miss and we want a full swing intent in the game? How do you guys approach that? Because you can train one way, but when you get in the game, that swing and miss, looking for a pitch to hit, how do you guys combat that?
I think first on the floor, a big piece that I'm extremely proud of is our entire softball staff are current or former softball players. So they've either played, coached at the collegiate level, and I think that voice is different than the former baseball player who coaches my daughter or coaches the girls. And so I think there's a lot more empathy that comes with that coaching to understand that, like, oh, I know why you think that and why you swing that way. And so that's how we kind of attack it on the front end. On the back end, we're trying to develop strong relationships with our coaches on the field. And we have partner programs and having like philosophies and allowing them to fail and struggle through that and knowing what they're struggling with. I think that's the other area that we're really trying to connect the dots on is we might say everything that we need to in the facility, but you go out to the field and your coach is like, oh, you just swung and missed and you struck out your first at bat. Well, then I'm pulling you. It's like, okay, now you've just ingrained that swinging and missing is unacceptable. And they'll take the dinker to the pitcher and be happy that I made contact versus, trying to swing and hit a line drive and hit the ball hard and far.
Yeah, we hear that a lot, and I think it's something that you can continuously always hit, but having a holistic approach where the coaches on the field, the people in the training center both have the same approach and they're teaching the same things. We always got the tip, if you're going to coach through someone, make sure you're coaching with that person that's actually on the field as well. Because if players hear things from multiple standpoints, it's hard. I can think that way as a player myself. You just don't know which way to kind of go about it and understand that. We talked a little bit about bat speed. I know you had mentioned attack angle. That's a big one for us on the baseball side. You were there for the softball side, but you jump bat speed above it. Talk about attack angle in the game of softball and what you see the differences between baseball, softball, and kind of how you approach that at your facility.
This is a big learning area for me. I'm a strength coach by trade. I was an ex-pitcher. The swing is something I've spent the last 2.5 years really trying to learn as much as I can. And I think the attack angle, biggest mistake we made was using the same ranges as our baseball side. And they were just slightly too high. Spoke to some really, really experienced coaches and knew what they were talking about. And the reason I put bat speed ahead of attack angle is because usually girls are way off on their bat speed. Attack angles aren't that far off. But our big mistake that we made initially was allowing attack angles to be above 5 degrees, positive 5. Majority of hitters will probably have way more success staying between 0 and 5 because they need to hit a lot of line drives. And then getting above that, like 5 to 8, like, so if your bat speed's over 55 miles an hour, like getting above that 5 to 8 range, like you'll start putting balls into the gaps. And then if you get above 8 to 10, that's where we want to be consistently into the upper 50s, as far as our bat speeds go. And then the one thing is, I used to preach that swinging down is taught in softball a ton. And I still think it is, but I do think I've changed my mind that the issue we see is the long and loopy swing. I'm swinging up too much. But again, it's been a learning curve for me, and it's really seeing the youth levels. It's like slow pitch fastball. Like pitching development in softball is so poor at the youth levels. If you go out and you watch a youth game, like it's literally like this massive arc. And so the girls getting loopy and swinging up, it's because they're adopting a swing path that gives them an opportunity to hit the ball and hit it hard and hit it on line. But that pitch then starts getting flatter as they get older, and if they don't make that adjustment, then it's going to really hinder them. So we've shifted a ton on the attack angle side, and the reason we've shifted is it's honestly probably the easiest metric to change. But we have learned, and again, former strength coach, and then Eric, former pitching coach, we used to just tell kids swing up, swing down. It's way more complicated than that. It doesn't stick just saying to do that. There's more to it than just saying, hey, your attack angle is low, we need to be higher. A big area of learning for me as far as blast goes.
Yeah, can you share a little bit, if you're willing to, some of the things you do communicate with the attack angle side? You know, you got someone in the cage, you're preaching out there at your facility. What are some of those specific things or drills you guys may do in the cages and the tunnels?
Big one for us is targets. We'll put targets into all of our cages. My staff, if they watch this, I'll probably make them watch this, but they gave me a hard time. It took like a month. We had made a change to the cages, and we usually have 2 giant targets in an area where we work on our blast drills. And they're like, Dan, you're killing me. I need the targets. They need that visual of where you're trying to hit the ball. So typically it's either the L screen, we want line drives over into or over the L screen, or we want to hit these targets. So just giving them that external focus, and then giving them the right drills, I think has been a really big deal for us. There's a tendency for, especially in softball, to talk a lot more about the athlete and them moving their bodies and feel this and upper hand this and lower hand that. And it's like, hey, just hit the line drive up there. Let's look at the blast. Oh, yep, that's what we want. Do it again. Do it again. Do it again.
Yeah.
Give them the right task. Give them the right focus, and they'll execute.
I'm so glad you brought up the self-organization and the external cues. It comes up with almost everyone that we have on this show that's doing a really good job, just like yourself. If you are teaching young athletes, they're trying to get better and learn at the same time. So when they're learning, it's a lot easier to do something with an external cue and an external focus than someone saying, hey, drive your elbow this way, be in this position. Those external cues we continuously see over and over to be successful. The targets are great. I love them. Great job. And hello to the staff. If you're watching this, shout out to the staff getting on this. So you talked about the targets on some of the drills. Is there anything else that if someone was listening to this, they're on their way to softball practice, maybe they're coaching a youth team, they're going to go do BP with their daughter, things like that. What are 2 things that they could do today in the cage to kind of help with not only bat speed, attack angle, or anything else that you guys are doing? What's like your 2 intro go-to drills?
Ooh. I want to say like the step backs is a big one. Learning how to load and unload that back hip is huge. I want to say the hook'em drill, where you have your front foot hooked around your back foot, and you're controlling your forward move. Those seem to be a staple. We use those a ton in what we call our youth development program. So our younger athletes, like, can you load your back hip? Can you control your forward move? Do you know how to do that? And if we do that pretty well, we're in a pretty good spot. The only other thing that I would say is, get off of a tee, get to flips. If you can get off flips to a machine, like, get game like as quickly as possible. We've done an internal study that looked at, like, swing mechanics off the tee don't translate to swing mechanics off of a machine. It's a completely different task. I've hit on this, and a lot of people give me a hard time that, like, we don't do tee work at the facility. We've eliminated it on the softball side for 2 big reasons. Girls do plenty of tee work. They'll hit into a bow net for hours, and there is no time constraint. If the ball is sitting on the tee and it's not moving, there is no time component to that. And so they can get long, they can get loopy, they can move how they want to move. There is no time component, and the ball's not moving. I make the joke, like, if you were to go to the driving range and you see a golfer having balls get tossed to them and they're hitting side toss, you're like, what the heck is that guy doing? Like, he should practice hitting off of the tee. And so it's like, well, then we do the opposite with softball, and we've shifted our tee work to the rotational prep, Proteus, med balls, water bags, the swing speed trainers. Like, we want to learn to rotate fast. So those would be probably the hopefully quick ones that they can take away.
Yeah, that's so perfect. Talk about how important it is to develop some of these things early, and how the doing or not doing of that early can affect them later in their career.
Yeah, I think the big one, softball players as a whole, female athletes don't get access to the weight room. They typically just go skill first, just lessons. They're going after the perfect swing, which doesn't exist, but they'll go all skill development. And the issue with that is that you're going to not have a foundation that's built for athleticism. And then I think on top of that, there are 2 opportunities to develop speed. Speed windows is not something I've made up. It's research and all is out there. They're all always pre-puberty. So there's 2 windows for girls to do this. It's earlier than boys. Girls hit puberty earlier. And so if we don't incentivize and develop speed for girls between the ages of 8 and 10, upwards of like 11, when they go through their first growth spurt, which is usually around 11 and 12, then we're going to miss out on that opportunity. If we don't incentivize it again when they go through their next growth spurt, which is right at the start of high school, we're going to miss out on that. And so I think incentivizing speed and incentivizing swinging hard and learning how to rotate fast at those younger ages is really, really important. And then allowing them to fail and figure it out. I think those are the big ones as we see for the young ones. Just because again, we have girls lifting weights at 10 years old in here. People think we're crazy. It's like, yeah, they're using a 10-pound dumbbell. Like they're using a 5-pound kettlebell. Like they're not using any crazy weights. Then they're learning how to control their bodies. They're learning how to move properly. And then we build that athlete and then apply that athleticism to the swing. So, yeah, I think that would be,
yeah. Again, the holistic approach is so good. And I think you hit a good thing. I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning when, they're used to 1 day of training a week in a facility. So when you have that time and you're really at the cages and you have those resources, you should jump to use those resources as quickly as you can. If you've got a bow net and a tee at home, that's your opportunity to get extra reps, just like you said. But when you're with a coach and you're in that cage, make sure you really use those tools at your disposal. And it really creates a great learning environment. Any last things you kind of want to leave our listeners with so that they can kind of take home? I know we've covered a lot here. I just want to make sure you have any opportunity to give any last takeaways.
Yeah, I got 2 big ones. Number one is understanding that girls are built differently than boys. Very, very simply put, if you look at most girls, they tend to be more pigeon-toed. If you look at our baseball players, they tend to be more duck-footed. It's not always the case, but what it is girls tend to have more hip internal rotation. What that does is it gives them so much slack when they go to load on that back hip. And if they don't have the glute and hamstring stability to then control their forward move, they're going to collapse. They're going to drop their back shoulder. They're going to swing up. And so understanding how that's going to play out and their hip range of motion, I think is a huge one. Most girls have plenty of hip internal rotation. They don't have a ton of hip external rotation. And so really, really common cue that I hear across the board is drive your hips, rotate your hips. We're not going to see a ton of hip rotation out of our softball players. And when you force them to rotate their hips, if their hips never stop, then their torso never stops, then their front shoulder never stops, and their front arm never stops. And so you're going to create this hitter that's just flying open over and over again because of trying to get more out of the lower half, and it's just going to look differently. I mean, a big thing for us environmentally is the way we set up our cages. Our athletes will do all their prep outside. They'll come into the facility, and then our first cage, they'll do all of their blast drills. So we'll bucket them based off of their blast metrics. What are they deficient in? We'll then go to cage 2. We have a swing assessment. We'll look at their mechanics and put them into buckets there. Cage 3 is our competition cage. And so the feedback loop is all within a session. I work on the mechanics, and then I see if it sticks. We light up the machine. We make it game-like. We got the hit tracks going. We got the girls watching. There's some extra pressure. We try and make it as game-like as possible, where the average feedback loop is I go to practice, I go to lessons, and then I wait for games. And so that time piece, I think, is just huge, that it takes forever to figure out, did this work? And we want to see that within an hour long, within the hour of hitting we do. Our sessions are 2.5 hours each time, but we want to see if it sticks in that moment. So then we can address it and connect it back to their drills so they understand what they're working on, versus having to wait to the game. Then I fall back to old habits and I'm swinging and missing and striking out and popping up or hitting ground balls, whatever it may be. And then you've got to go all the way back to the start to kind of get it fixed. So I think that's another big one for us.
That's awesome. Do you find that girls take some of the drills and stuff and they build them into their routines? It almost, in your cages, that's the perfect example. You do drill work, you get movement prep, you get your swing dialed, and then you go test it. A lot of people take that, and especially at the highest levels, they build routines to get themselves ready every day. So do you find that girls take those drills and they continue to do them after they've made those adjustments to almost stay like calibrated as they approach games?
Yeah. Every hitter that trains with us gets 7 days a week of hitting programming with a video database attached to it. So they have it on their phones. They know exactly what to do. I would say yes. A reason I've gotten way more passionate about our softball population versus our baseball population, they are way more process oriented. they care about how they do things and the way they do things, and they're intentional. Whereas like our baseball players, they could go and deadlift 500 pounds and it's the worst form in the world. And you're like, that's going to kill your back. But I lifted 500 pounds. Like that's all, all that matters is the outcome. And so on our softball side, they care a ton about their process. And I think you definitely see that bleed out into their practices and to what their routines at home. They definitely take it more serious.
That's awesome. Dan, thank you so much for coming on the Blast Motion podcast. I hope our listeners enjoyed. I certainly did. Check out some of our other episodes. Dan, if we want to find more information about your program, your facility, or yourself, what are some of the best ways to do so?
Instagram would be KPI Softball. Look that up. You'll see a ton as far as our facility, our staff, our athletes. Mine personally, I think I'm a little more active on Twitter, X. I think there's a debate right now of what to call it. But Dan Cabuling, find that on that platform. And then my email, dan@kpimh. I did a podcast for NFCA. I've already got some outreach there. Like I'll hop on phone calls, I'll email, I'll hop on Zooms. Like I want to connect, I want to help, I want to support softball development, no matter where you're at. So I'm happy to speak about what we do.
Awesome. Dan, KPI has been a wonderful partner of Blast, and we're so proud of what you guys are doing and helping young players get better. So it's really great. Dan, thank you so much. And our listeners, we'll see you guys next episode.